What's up guys, it's Ren from Tacoma Vibe, and today we're going to be installing the Perry Parts bump stops on the 2nd gen Tacoma and the 3rd gen Tacoma. Stay tuned. So the Perry Parts bump stops are made with industrial grade polymer, so it's 20% stronger than your natural bump stops. And a lot of the bump stops on these stock Tacomas, whether it's the 3rd gen or even the 2nd gen, are metal. So these are compression dampening just monsters. They're great. So when your suspension bottoms out, maybe you're towing, you're hauling, or off-roading, these Perry Parts bump stops are really going to help you guys and prolong the life and duration of your suspension system, which is pretty costly. So if you're bottoming out a lot, these are going to help you a lot. They're 3D printed and they're tested pretty rigorously, I'd say. They go through about 100,000 cycles. If you go check out perryparts.com, Pat's website breaks it down tit for tat exactly what they do to test it, and they stand by their product. So I'm a big fan. They're actually a New England based company, so big advocate of supporting local, especially because I am in New England, Connecticut specifically, and I think we rise by lifting others. So if we could lift people up in the local community that we have for overlanding, it's only going to help us. So today I'm going to be starting with the 2nd gen Tacoma. Reason being is on my 3rd gen Tacoma, the Tacoma Vibe build, which some of you may be familiar with, I already have the first iteration of the Perry Parts bump stops on there, so it's going to be tough to show you that contrast. But with my dad's truck, the 2nd gen Tacoma, there are no new bump stops on it. It is the stock bump stop. So I'll be able to show you what the difference is between Perry Parts and the stock bump stops, and we'll get those installed and I'll show you how to do it. It's very simple. A couple different ways to skin the cat here. Personally, I like to take off the tires. It gives me the opportunity to inspect the rotors, the brakes, and just look at the overall suspension system, make sure there's no cracks or any issues that could be happening from whatever it is you're using your truck for. For me personally, a fair amount of off-roading and overlanding. All right, so the first order of business is to take off the tire. So I recommend breaking the bolts on your tire before you actually lift up the truck, because then you're gonna have to have someone brake, and that's kind of a pain in the ass. And now I'm just realizing I didn't do that on the passenger side. But regardless, lift your truck up. We're gonna get access to the bump stop behind this tire, and I'll show you the difference between the Perry Parts and the stock bump stop on the Tacoma, specifically for the 2nd gen, but just overall, you're gonna notice quite the difference. All right, so we got the stock bump stop off. You can see just how little this is actually gonna do for your truck. I highly recommend, also just because I love them and they're freaking awesome, Monkey Wrench. Monkey Wrench is super helpful for taking off the front bump stops. They're a little stiff at first, especially if you're removing the stock ones. Now it's time to put on the Perry Parts bump stop. This part's actually a lot easier than taking off the stock bump stop. So all we're gonna do is just kind of screw this in. You can see how beautifully set up it is. But really quickly, just a quick comparison here. You're gonna get so much more compression dampening from the Perry Parts bump stops. And again, it's made from a stronger polymer, so it's going to be providing a lot more protection than what this kind of like metal fake rubber thing from the factory is gonna be doing. So highly recommend it. They just look great too. And then we'll move to the back shortly after I get the front done. So no install really ever goes off without a hitch. There's always something in any project you do, especially when you're working on your truck. For me today, it was this. You see that? So the bolt broke off in the suspension. So I have to now figure out how to get this out. And we actually also found some cracks in my dad's CV axles as well. So we're addressing how we want to handle that. But this is a bit of a bummer. If anyone's ever been in this position where the threading gets caught where it was threaded into, it's a bit of a pain in the ass, and you have to use like an easy out.
So what are you saying this? Nice. Grease everywhere.
Okay, so you don't need to take off your rear tires in order to replace the bump stop right here, but for video purposes, it's a little bit easier to show you what we're getting into and how we're gonna swap it out. So you can't really see it, but it's a U-bolt, and I believe it's 17 millimeters, at least it was on my 3rd gen. Not so sure on the 2nd gen, but I can't imagine they changed it. All you're gonna do is loosen them, not take them off, just loosen them, and then this stock bump stop is gonna slide off, and then we can replace it with the Perry Parts bump stop. I'll show you in just a second. So that is the stock bump stop. As you can see, there's the U-bolt there, 17 millimeter underneath, I believe, and then you're just going to loosen this enough where you can kind of slide and finagle this out with the new bump stop. So like I said, pretty simple to install the back bump stops and the front bump stops. Again, I ran into an issue where the front bump stops broke off, so I had to basically tap it and take the old one out. But the back bump stops are easy. Again, you don't have to take off the tire. I did that just to be able to showcase the actual bump stop itself, but you can clearly tell a difference between the factory bump stop, which again, if you guys could feel this, it is hard as a rock, whereas the Perry Parts, it is still very stiff and firm, but it is going to provide a lot more compression dampening. It's going to be a lot more useful when you're towing, hauling, and off-roading. So really stoked to see how the 2nd gen performs with the Perry Parts bump stops on. Now I just need to go hit up the other side, but that's pretty much it for installing these. It's very simple if you don't run into any issues. And then I'm going to be switching these out on 3rd gen. I don't have the stock ones. I have the first iteration of the Perry Parts bump stops, and they sent me another one to try out. So I'm going to put on the 2nd generation or the 2nd iteration of those Perry Parts bump stops on my 3rd gen Tacoma, the Tacoma Vibe build. If you're not already following the Tacoma Vibe build on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, please do so. Click that subscribe button, like the video, and help a brother out. Thank you guys, and we're gonna move on to 3rd gen in just a second. Also wanted to quickly note the U-bolts in the back of the Tacoma. It's not a 17 millimeter, at least for the 2nd gen. It's a 22 millimeter for the U-bolts for the back bump stop. Whether it's stock or the Perry Parts bump stop, you still need to put that bolt in. 22 millimeters. I fucked up. I said it was 17. Wrong. Maybe it's 17 for the 3rd gen and I'm remembering incorrectly, but for the 2nd gen, it's 22 millimeters. All right, guys, so I know I said I would get to do the 3rd gen Tacoma, my build, but I didn't get to because I had one of the front bump stops from the stock 2nd gen Tacoma break off. The bolt broke off as I showed in the video, and that took a lot of time to get out, even though I probably made it look like it was 15 seconds. It was more like 2 hours. It sucked. We had to go to Lowe's and get a tool for it. So the same steps apply. The 2nd gen Tacoma bump stops, when you're replacing the stock, same thing for the 3rd gen Tacoma. The only difference that I believe is that the back bump stop for the 3rd gen Tacoma is 17 millimeter bolts for the U-bolt, whereas the 2nd gen is 22 millimeter bolts for the U-bolt. But beyond that, the same steps apply. Again, you don't have to remove the back tire to do that portion of the bump stops, but I did just for video purposes. I actually prefer to do that. One, it's not hard to take off a tire, and it's just much easier to work with and finagle. But if you want to do it a different way, then feel free to do so. But highly recommend the Perry Parts bump stops. I am a big fan of the brand, and it's served my truck incredibly well, and I've gone on some pretty crazy excursions so far in New England, looking to do some more crazy excursions as well. If you guys haven't liked, followed, or subscribed to the channel, please do so. It helps me out a lot. Hopefully you found this video helpful and informative, and make sure to stay tuned for more content. Thank you guys. Talk to you all soon. Peace.